All right, welcome to Views for Beginners. My name is Stuart. I will be your host, whatever. I should probably stand back here so that the microphone will actually pick me up, which I like to wander, so we'll see if that happens. So how many of you are like completely new to Views? Okay, how many of you have used Views before? Okay, great. Of those who have used Views before, like, what's your comfort level? Anyone? Like, what have you like built your own views? Have you just kind of looked at views and said this is scary? What?
Edited mostly, created.
Okay, so I think you know what my real goal here in this session is to kind of demystify the Views interface, make sure that you all kind of have a good understanding of what Views is used for and how to create basic views and edit views that are not too complicated, and give you some of the tools that you'll need to understand some of the more complicated views and be able to edit or maintain them. So if that sounds too basic for you, you might want to sneak into another session. I understand. I won't be insulted. But if that sounds like what you're here for, then great. So the Views module, it's generally considered the most popular contributed module for Drupal. And contributed module just means that it's a module that has been created by the community that's not part of what you get when you download Drupal itself. Now, in Drupal 8, the next version, it will be part of what you get when you download Drupal itself, which is pretty cool, because almost everyone installs it. So I think technically it's can't be the most popular contributed module in Drupal, because it has a prerequisite, which is the CTools module. So anyone who downloads and installs Views is also installing CTools, and there are probably some people, like me, that install CTools without Views. So CTools is just like a set of kind of helper APIs and functions and things like that that could be used by Drupal developers to add all kinds of cool functions to the website. So, what is Views? This is my one-sentence summary. Views is a module for Drupal that lets you build relatively complicated database queries through a user interface that's not too hard to understand. So, it gives you a nice UI that there's a wizard to start off with, and then you can refine things after that, that let you choose how you're going to present data in your website. Now, what does that mean? And what that really means is, well, it depends on what you want to do. I mean, for most people, it means that you're going to create like lists of data, right? So when you install Drupal and you have some stuff that's like promoted to your front page by default, your content, maybe it's like blog posts. It'll list like the title of the blog post, the author, and like a little summary. You know what I'm talking about? And let's say you want to change how that displays. Let's say you want to include a picture there, or you want to take out that summary of data, or you want to display the full page of data, or you want to, list the author's name 14 times for some bizarre reason. You can use views to do that. Now, that's a really basic use for views. You can also use views to combine data from different types of content. You can use views to present content that is filtered in some way. So let's say we only want the front page to display content from, one of 3 users, or we only want to have the front page display content that has comments on it, where people have actually entered comments or haven't entered comments. It doesn't matter. It also lets you sort that data. So by default, it's sorted by news first. We could sort it alphabetically. We could sort it alphabetically by author. We could group that content in different ways. There are a large variety of things we can do. And I'll show you some examples. Why don't I just show you some examples? So since we're at the National Institutes of Health, and since we have as our wonderful volunteer Karen Steely here, I am going to use as an example her website, which I built for her. And let me find that. So this is the website for the Lister Hill National Center for Biomedical Communications, which is a division of the library here. And it's a website. It looks like a website. Now, if we look at this, there are views all over this page. This front page here is just a series of different views. And views can be displayed as a page, kind of like the front page of Drupal, or like a typical blog page, like the view of blog post. You can also display views in blocks. Does everyone know what blocks in Drupal are? Anyone not know what blocks in Drupal are? Okay. Great. So let's just take a look at this page for a second. So this is, a slideshow. You've seen slideshows on websites before. This is created via a view. This is a little more complicated than most of the views on the front page. But the way it works is there's a type of content that has an image. It has like a little snippet of text there along the bottom, and it has a link. And we're displaying the image and that text, and we're linking both of those things to the URL in that link field. And we're using a special formatter for the gallery that comes, I think it's an add-on to views, that gives you the basic format for a slideshow that will handle things like what the transition effects are and things like that. And then, there's some themes to make it look pretty. If we look over here at the news, this is a very, very simple view of news articles. We're just listing 4 of them here. So I don't remember off the top of my head how that's defined. Karen, maybe you do. Is it just like the 4 most recent? Okay. So we're just ordering them in terms of most recent, and we're listing 4 of them. And we're just listing the titles, not listing any sort of summary or anything. And as we go down the page, we can see something similar for events, which also includes the dates. We can see something similar for these organizations, which are a special content type on this site. And you can see that there's also these views here of projects and each of these views for projects are associated with one of these research areas, and they're being kind of filtered by those research areas. So you can see there's all these different ways of displaying content, and nothing on here is too complicated, but they're all querying the database in different ways dynamically. And as the slate is updated, as new events are added, as new news is added, those are going to automatically update. You don't need to maintain that. It's not like a menu where you go in and add the new links. It's just pulling it from the database based on whatever is the newest, or however you set that filter. There are also kind of some other interesting view displays that can be set up. There's a calendar display. I guess we don't have anything in this month, but if we flip over to the year, you can see this is, again, another view of events, but this, in addition to just the date and title, has some additional information, a location in the building, some text. If there was a speaker, I think the speaker would also show up. And you can see over here that we have some filters. So we can select what year we want to look at. And that'll update. And we can see, or we can filter this by, the type of event that we're looking at. And that's all. Those are all filters that can be done in views. And I will show you a little bit of how that works. So I have a over here. Pull this up, and this is just the views page on Drupal.org. You haven't seen it. Does everyone here know how to install a module on Drupal? Anyone not? Feel free to raise your hand if you have questions or anything throughout, because I'm pretty informal about this kind of thing. She's laughing at me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a really basic website. I downloaded Drupal. I installed CTools because I had to, and views and nothing else. And then I created a content type to talk about my wizards. My wife and I have a fairly large wizard collection, and I needed some content to add here. And so for each of these pieces of content that are listed on the front page, they're each one of our lizards. And type, just has a title here, and if we click onto it, this, by the way, is not a view. This is just the standard front page. And maybe this will work. All right, so this is Newton, who is one of our red Ackies, which is a dwarf monitor from Australia. He likes to sit in my pocket. And we kind of go through each of these, and for each of these, I list out what the species name is, what kind of things they eat, gender, weight, and I stuck in a taxonomy of general type of lizard. And so we can use this to generate all kinds of different ways of filtering and sorting data. So if you want to use views, it's under the structure menu. And normally I use the admin menu module, which I didn't install in this just to keep things simple, which provides a nice drop down. But and this is the views user interface, which is actually a separate module. When you download views, you get two modules, views and GUI. You need to enable both of them if you want to be able to create views, through the user interface. Once your site is live, you can turn off the Views UI module. And in general, like unless you need to edit your views, I recommend doing that. Just better not to have the modules enabled, performance, such. So you can see here that it comes with, Views comes with a bunch of views already built. Each of these views tells you a little bit about what it does. They're all disabled by default. So let's kind of take a look at what information they have here. See, like, under the view name has the name, which is in bold, and it has this thing displayed. And that's just saying, all right, well, what kind of output is the view generating? Is it generating age? Is it generating a block? Is it generating an RSS feed or an XML feed? They just call it a feed. And a single view can display multiple types of output, which is pretty cool. So, like, if you wanted to create a blog page and then have an RSS feed for your blog, you could use the same view and just add a RSS display. You can see that these are in code. That is really just meaning the product package with the module. And type here for these is content. And what that means is really think of it as like the table that you're querying. So when if the type is content, that means that we're really creating a list of nodes. You could have type user, where you would be creating a list of user accounts. Type could be taxonomy term, if you're creating a list of taxonomy terms. If you have other entities in Drupal, things that you wanted to create a query based on, that would be the type. Now, just because something is a type content doesn't mean that it can't be influenced by the user accounts. There are ways to create relationships between, say, content and the user that created that content. And I'll show you a little bit of that in a minute, but that's a little more advanced. But what that would do is let you say order content by, the alphabetical order of the username of the person who created it. If you wanted to do something crazy. But there are plenty of reasons you might want to do that. Or say you want to list content created by a certain user role first. Created by people who have certain. But they have like members and for bloggers and super bloggers. With all your super bloggers, blog posts before you let them up. Description, tag, all that does is lets you kind of put things on the page for ease of use. So if you have like 8 views that have to do with blog, you can tag them all to blog, which will make finding things on this page a little easier, which can be a little confusing on a very complicated site with a lot of views. Path, if there is any path to display, if it's just a block display, but it's a page display, if you will. And then operations just lets you do things to them, like enable them or disable them or delete them or edit them. I think those are probably the options there. You can also clone and export. So you can export a view, which allows you to import it to, you see that import button up on top. You could import a view from one site to another. And cloning a view can be really useful if you want if you create a complicated view and then you want another view that's similar to that, but just a little different, and you don't want to go through like recreating the entire thing. You could just clone it and change a little bit. So let's add a new view. Let's say we want to create a page that just lists, say, pictures of all of my lizards. All right. So we click on the Add a New View button. Shocking. And this gives us like kind of a wizard. And I'm just going to scroll down this before we do anything. You can see that it asks you for a view name. It says what should we show, content, or files, or taxonomy terms, users, other weird stuff. What type of things do we want to show? And that's just content types. Do we want to filter it by a tag? And is there a way we want to sort it? And then it says, allows us to create a page. If we scroll down, it also gives us the option to create a block. Create a page is checked by default. This one isn't, but I'm going to check it just so you can see the options. With the page, there isn't anything too scary here. It asks you what do we want the title and the path of that page to be. This display format thing we'll come back to in just a second. How many things should we display? Do we want to use a pager? Create a menu link, include a feed, and really the block is even simpler than that. So let's create a page that shows images of lizards, and I'll just call it pictures. All right, and if we want a description to show up on that big list page that we saw before, we just type it here. And we want to show content, because the images are a field on the node content type of type lizard. And do we want to sort it in any way? Let's leave it unsorted for now. And you can see this already filled in this with some defaults, and those are fine. Now, display format. Display format is pretty cool. This is what gives you things like that slideshow or calendars if you have the right modules installed. There are all kinds of additional modules that add onto views that give you additional functionality. One of the nice things that a lot of them do is add additional display mode formats. Sorry, not display modes, those are different. So these are the default display formats. In this case, I think, for most things, you're probably going to use an unformatted list. Table is nice when you really want to get your data in a tabular format with field names across the top and the content in the cells. For this, I think we want a grid, right? Probably just pictures maybe in 3 columns across or something. So I'm going to click on grid, maybe. And let's see, grid of, well, I don't want teasers, I don't want full posts, I just want the images. So that would be a field, right? And items display, I want it to display everything. Drupal fancy convention is if you don't put something in, it will display everything. Usually it tells you that, here it doesn't. Since I'm displaying everything, I don't need it here. And sure, we could add a menu link. And we'll just add to the main menu. That's fine. And we'll call long text, we'll capitalize that for fun. We don't need an RSS feed. So I'm going to save and exit. Normally I would continue and exit, but I just want to show you how this shows up by default. So right now, this is not a list of pictures because I haven't actually told it what fields to use, so by default it's just using the title field. Now if I go back to the views page, you can see that it's here and the description filled in. And now we can go in and edit it. And once we edit the view, we get taken to a different screen, which is a bit more complicated. But it's really not that scary if you think about it. So title, we know what that is. Format, we already filled that in. There's some additional settings there, and we'll check those out in a second. Fields, it's showing the title, which we already knew because we just saw it. Filter criteria, it's showing content that's published, so it's not going to show unpublished things. And content of type wizard, so the wizard content type, which we told it to do. So nothing in that column. Oh, and sort criteria, we told it unsorted, so there is no sort criteria. So nothing in that first column should be a surprise at all, right? Cool. That puts you ahead of most people who get to this page and freak out because it looks scary. Now, the second column, again, not too complicated. Page settings tells you what path it is, which we set. Menu, we set that. Access, that is, by default, it's just set to, you can control the access to the view. So you could, for instance, limit the view to a particular user role or something like that. For this, it's just kind of the default access of view published content. If you have access to viewing published content, you can see the view. Header and footer, we could add some text or whatever we wanted as a header or footer to the view, which is sometimes really convenient. And pager, we told it to not display a pager and display everything, right? So that should be pretty clear as well. Now there's this third column that's advanced and that's closed. We're not really going to get into that because this is used for beginners, but I will let you see it. And this is where it's okay to be a little afraid, but you don't really need to worry about much of this stuff for now. The one thing that can be really cool here that I'll mention a little bit is relationships, because it's not too hard to get the basic idea down, which is, this is if you wanted to add like fields from a related thing that's not the wizard content type. So if you wanted to, say, add some data to this about the user who created whatever particular piece of content, maybe for sorting, maybe for displaying like a little bio on a blog post or something like that, you can add a relationship to the user that created that, and then that gives you access to fields on that user ID. All right, so I'm going to close this, and maybe we'll come back to it if we have questions later. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's first click on here and see what kind of settings we have for the grid. We can do some grouping if we wanted to, which is kind of cool. I don't think we're going to do that here. We can also define the number of columns. There's striping. Most of this stuff you can generally ignore. I said we wanted to do 3 columns, so we'll do 3 columns. I don't think that's just a stylistic choice. And you can see it has like, how do you want to align it? Do you want to include a caption for accessibility? And that's good stuff to do, but for the purposes of this demo, we can just set it to 3 columns and not worry about it. Yep.
That grouping one, is that for grouping fields within this type? Like if you wanted to pull different fields besides the image?
We'll get to that, but basically it's, let's say I had, I was listing blog posts by author. I could group on the author, for instance. And so, it'll kind of like pull them all into kind of that family version. I encourage you to play with a lot of these settings. This is one of those things where, depending on your use case, it could be incredibly useful or utterly useless. So let's take a look at the settings for fields. And I don't think we really need to worry about this, but you should take a look at it and know that there are some settings here. The inline fields is kind of interesting. Sometimes you want, if you're creating a list, you may want certain things to show up on the same line. For instance, when we were looking at the Lister Hill website with the events, you saw like the date and the location were showing up in the same line. By default, they would show up in different lines unless you set them to be inline fields. Like here. And if you wanted to have a separator, like the vertical bar that we have on that site, you would use them here. Usually use a comma or something, but it depends on your use case. You can set it to hide empty fields. So if you have, say, a field label of location, if there was no location set, that label wouldn't show up if we check that. So I'm just going to cancel that because we're not actually changing any of those. So we're going to look at the fields. And this is where a lot of the work happens. When you check a field, depending on the field type, you're going to have some different options here. But the really basic things are, these 3, which is, do we want a label for the field? So if we check this, by default, I'm not going to have one, but we could create one. It could be like title, so we could have, title, whatever. We don't need a label. We don't actually want to display this field. So exclude from display. Yeah, we'll exclude that from display because we don't want to display it, as I just said. Now, why would we have a field that we're not displaying? Sometimes you want to load the data into the view and use it somewhere else. And this I'll touch on this when we get down to the rewrite results. That's a little more advanced, but I'll show it to you. And link this field to the original piece of content, so that just outputs the field at the link to. So one thing that's important to note. This says apply to all displays. That's controlled from up here, and apply it to this display. In this case, we only have one display, but if we had yeah, I know. Now we have 2 displays, I guess. But if you apply it to all the displays, then if you have a block display, it'll save it to that as well. So you want to be really careful about kind of the scope of what you're editing with views. And the other thing you also want to remember is to save your view. Because despite the fact that I applied that, this is not saved until I actually hit that button in the upper right-hand corner. So right now our view is displaying absolutely nothing because I excluded this field from the display. So we want to show the image. So I'm going to add a field. And so this lists the fields that are available to me. Scroll down until I find image, and I'm going to click on that. And this also includes, a bunch of like metadata, like the node ID, the comment user ID, the last comment time, all kinds of stuff. So I'm going to save this or apply this. And now it gives me some options for this field, and these should look familiar. I don't want a label, because I just want a grid of pictures. Exclude from display now. And so now we have this formatter. And it's an image, so really the only formatter option we have at the moment is image. There are different, we might have like a slideshow formatter option or gallery formatter option that could be provided by additional module, which we don't have installed. And then you can see that there's this image style, and this just accesses the Drupal image styles. Is everyone familiar with Drupal image styles or no? You can define image styles for Drupal. We'll just use the large, and we want to link the image to the content, to the page. And let's apply this. It's all displays. Now, if we scroll down, we should see a preview of our view. We can say that's looking kind of like what we want, but it's kind of big. So let's edit that and maybe change that to the medium image style. Great, it's better image size. And now let's just save this and see what we got. Back to our home page, and we have our menu item, and we have our nice grid of pictures. We can click into any of them. So any questions so far? Yeah. Like what are you looking for?
Well, and there's like the names of that, so then that may not
That, I mean, most of the time, I mean, you could use views. Most of the time, you're going to use the print module, which is a very commonly used Drupal module that basically includes like a little icon in the upper right-hand corner or lower right-hand corner that links to a separate version of the page that you generally create, like, with a different template. It could also help with the
So you could say that
there may be a module that presents a PDF display format. I'm not sure. Off the top of my head.
for every view that you have
Sorry?
for every view we create, the kind of thing this is allowing you to choose moving the nugget file. And kind of thing you say that you have
Well, I mean, generally, this is, like, typically you're going to be using this with a MySQL database. And so the, like, the view itself is stored in the same database. In Drupal really generally, like the default view of Drupal, or the default installation of Drupal functions off of a single database, which stores both the configuration and your data and your content. Now you can export the view code so that through a feature, so that the query is basically a model. But so there is views caching, and that is in that third advanced column. There's like just basically a checkbox that lets you enable views caching. Now the problem is with views caching is that you want your views to be dynamic. So if they exchanges, you want your views to update. So there's some trade-offs there based on performance versus accuracy, I guess, depending on how often your data gets updated, and whether you're going to clear the caches every time your data gets updated. Any other questions at this point? I'm sorry? Oh yeah, you can create SQL manually. I mean, this is just a nice UI for creating the views and or creating the queries, basically. So I'm going to go back into that view, and where is this? You can set it up so that yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head, but you can set it up to display the actual query that's being written. But there's a query being written behind the scenes. And the problem with Drupal is that the database schema is, have you looked at the database schema for a typical Drupal site? Okay, like, it's not like all the data from a single content type is being stored in one data. Every field has enough data. And so, writing queries by hand, yes, you can do it. Sometimes it's the best way to do it. But for most things, you're going to save a ton of time. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it depends on your use case. There are certainly some times where we've done some high performance sites where some of the views that were created, we did testing on them, and they were very slow queries. And some of those we had rewritten manually to simplify and speed up. But it really is going to depend on the use and how much.
Because I mean, and maybe the first, I just raised it. Yeah.
Okay, so let me go back to the views list page, and I'll demystify that a little bit. So what you don't see on here is, the name here is really just like a name for the administrator. It's a human readable name. There is going to be a machine name behind the scenes, and that's what can't be. Yeah, Drupal will just like add it up at the end of everything if you try. So you'll get the true one. To create a view of views. I don't think so. Let's take a quick look. Yeah, I don't think that you can really create a view of views. But, yeah. Sorry. Sorry? So, I mean, is it a Drupal database? Okay, so what Views does is it creates queries for a Drupal set. So if you have like a separate database, that's not Drupal. That Views isn't going to be really like your one that you use. Yeah, you want you like if you can pull the data into Drupal, because Views really interfaces with like the structure that's built within Drupal. So the entity. So if it's not stored in Drupal fields or really like things, then Views isn't going to know. Any other questions? Well, keep going. But wanted to give people a chance to ask. So I'm going to go back and edit this view and show you some other options. So I'm going to go into this image field, and we're going to take a look down here. You can see that there are some drop-downs, and just like the advanced drop-downs, these are some like advanced things that most of the time you're not going to need. The one really cool one that I'm going to show you right now is the rewrite results, because this can be extremely useful. They can all be extremely useful, but this is not too hard to understand. So we're displaying the image field, but the rewrite results gives us the power to change how we're displaying that. And it gives us the power to change how we're displaying that in such a crazy way that we could have it display the contents of another field as the image field, essentially. So you can see that there's checkbox for rewrite the output of this field, which would be basically we could say we could rewrite everything. Output this field as a link, which we're already doing, but we could link it to something other than trim this field to a maximum length if it was like a body field, the text body field, and we only wanted to show 140 characters or something. Strip out HTML tags within a body field, for instance. Remove white space if there's a lot of white space. Yeah, all different kinds of options here. And then there's more, which is nice, but we're not going to really worry about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on rewrite the output of this field, because this is kind of the cool one. And it gives you the ability to display text, including HTML. And it also gives you some tokens, including that title, which was excluded from our display, but still loaded into the view, so it's accessible here. So, and the image. So let's say we want to display both the title and the image. We could just like take the token and we can include HTML if we want. So let's say we want the title to be bolded, essentially. By that, and then we can see that even though the title is excluded from the display, we're displaying it here, and this is actually, you know, if we look at the output, it's going to be like part of the same field as its output. Now, this use case, not incredibly useful, but you could probably see how, you know, it could be really helpful to, you know, do this. For instance, we could include, let's say, if we wanted to do a slideshow in the hard way, we could output the image as, and let's say it's a slideshow of things on other websites. And so the content type has an image, maybe a screenshot of that website, URL link to that website, title to that website. We could output, say, the image wrapped in a href with that URL from a separate field, and output that all as the same field, so that when you have two different fields, your URL field and your image field, but your output is really showing a image field that's linked to that URL, which is kind of cool. All right. So I realize that we're pretty much out of time, but I'll hang around if you have any additional questions.